Hey, peace and blessings to you. My name is Jerry B. I am the entree musician, and so are you. And do we not have an incredible conversation that is coming up? A wonderful, wonderful man that I've just met. I'm sure he is my new best friend because he has created a situation which is just I don't think the word admirable is deep enough, but it touches me and I'm sure it's going to touch you. This is John Lumgair, and he's joining us from across the pond. He has an incredible concept called Jazz Cow, and we're going to talk about it today. What's going on, John?
Thank you for your kind words. Yeah, I'm excited to chat with you about Jazz Cow.
No, I mean it sincerely. As I told you before we went live here, is the fact that even the email that you sent this morning, although you had sent me preliminary information and we had an opportunity to talk, I was touched deeply with all of the layers of truth that you have formulated in this concept, Jazz Cow. I'm going to read this, which is right off your website, and then let's go in deeper. Okay?
Yeah, sure.
It says Jazz Cow is an animated situation comedy about a jazz playing cow who reluctantly leads a group of artists, poets, and misfits in resisting big tech guru Dr. Popp in his world of algorithms and fake filters. Wow, did you lay out the present music industry? So let's go all the way back from the beginning. I guess the very first thing that I need to ask you is, John, are you a musician or songwriter or producer?
I'm not. So I have a trumpet. I
Mm-hmm.
used to play. I haven't given up because even when I've been really poor, I've never sold it.
I see.
And I got it out a couple of years ago. We had a little kid around our house, and he really wanted me to hear me play something. So I had a play of the Saints Go Marching On, which the valves were really sticky and it was quite hard to get it to work. But I could just about pull it off.
Mm-hmm. So, were you in a musical family, or you have a love for music or a love for jazz?
So musical family. So my dad plays. So in my immediate family, my dad plays piano, guitar, but not professionally. My mum would play piano, guitar,
Mm-hmm.
trumpet, um, and various other things. Again, not professionally. And then I've got
Mm-hmm.
three brothers. Um, one plays drums, one plays uh, piano, and he did play clarinet when he was young. And he's in a band, and my wife sometimes sings in his band. And then I've got other brothers play instruments and I've got another brother and he plays something in
Something.
and my uncle was a professional musician, and
uh,
I've spent like many people as teenagers, you kind of discover music.
yeah,
You're always aware of it, but then
yeah,
you really kind of go, oh, music is actually magical. And so you
absolutely.
start discovering things, you go to record shops, you start making connections between different albums, and you're like, oh, that person played on that. And it
Yeah.
starts to become this really exciting world. And you're like, how did this person like communicate this feeling to me with just sound? It's incredible. So yeah.
Yeah, that's absolutely on point. So tell me then, with respect to that, I'm sure you have an appreciation of every genre of music. Why did you settle on jazz?
Well, I'm probably the main things I listen to actually are jazz and classical music,
Uh-huh.
but I do listen to loads of other stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
I it's really hard to know because it started with a group of us laughing about superheroes and cartoon animals and how cartoon animals always have the same kind of superhero abilities and they're always like ones involved in fighting. But
Yeah.
then we were thinking, well, why that kind of power and why not the power to play jazz? And it was this kind of ridiculous conversation that we had that this idea came out of.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is, why was you kind of um, look back and you kind of go, well, what was going on? Why did I pick the word? Why? Well, it wasn't necessarily me. I don't even know who said it, but why was jazz brought up?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. A theory I've had recently is it was before we had this conversation. It was my birthday, and I listened to, and I'd got a CD of Miles Davis's "In a Silent Way," which I'd been listening to a lot.
Yeah.
So that may have been in the subconscious. Or another theory is that there were loads and loads of ideas. We kept coming up with loads of ideas,
Mm.
and maybe it's my interest in jazz that kept this one going, and to keep working on it. It's hard to know.
Wow. Well, I tell you what, because I'm a musician, I put the music first, but the concept is just as strong. So, first of all, you have to tell me who we are. I know that you have a team, and please let us
Mm.
know who they are. And then secondly, I'm putting the music first, but the wonderful layers of truth that undergird this superhero are equally important. So, would you explain that as well?
Yeah. So, in terms of the team,
Yeah.
there's a writer, James Carey, who is
Mm-hmm.
a British sitcom writer. He's written a number of well-known sitcoms. The probably the most famous is his work on Miranda, which is a very popular show in the UK. But
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, he's done loads of stuff. Look him up on IMDb. I've got a great character designer called Ceylon, who has done work on loads of shows. And the core team that I worked with initially was a guy called John and Chris, who were my housemates at the time. And Chris is writing an illustrated book. John does all sorts of things. He's a handyman. He works for a church. He does animation. He does all sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so those guys are not so much part of the picture, but still involved. And then I've got all sorts of um, others around me. So there's a guy who's a storyboard expert who worked on everything from Rick and Morty more recently, Animaniacs. Historically, he's just done loads of stuff.
Wow.
And then got quite a good lineup of actors, and um, lots of that has not yet been announced. And then we've got musicians, and we've got on our team we've got a guy called Sultan Stevenson, and
Mm-hmm.
he's one of these kind of young. So the British jazz, so putting in context, the British jazz scene is very exciting. There's lots and lots of things going on in
Excellent.
Britain, and I think that cross um, it's the crossroads of lots of different things. So people are bringing in all sorts of influences from everywhere, and it's a
Mm-hmm.
really exciting thing. So you can hear British contemporary jazz, and you're listening to something, you go, "Oh, that's influenced by that and that," and everyone's so different, and it's so alive. And Sultan is one of these kind of young guys who's at the more straight ahead end of the spectrum, and um, he's getting written about, and his last album did um, majorly good reviews. A
Yeah.
guy called um, Dominic J. Marshall, who's more at the contemporary experimental end of jazz, and does lots of stuff with hip hop and soul and this kind of thing. He's another guy working on it. A young rapper called Lay Full Stop, and
Mm-hmm.
she's in Manchester, so not in London like the rest.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and she's going to bring her thing to it. And then we've got Heidi Vogel, who she sung with the cinematic orchestra. Actually, um, Dominic was also in the cinematic orchestra for a while,
I see.
and she's just the most incredible singer. So we've got these guys all working, are going to be working on this project. So
Wow.
yeah, I can't remember what
That's
the other
excellent.
question was. It took so long.
Yeah. No, no, that's wonderful. So I know, as I said before, there's so many different layers of what's going on, at least here in the United States, and I'm sure because you're pulling on it, it's probably a global epidemic of Dr. Pop and his fake filters and algorithms. But some of what we talked about offline, I want to bring to fore because there's a lot of layers of truth that you're getting into as far as society is concerned and cultural issues and what's right, what's wrong, how Jazz Cow feels about it and his band, and why
Mm,
this makes them superheroes. So I'm just gonna let you explain it because when you wrote it out to me, it's wonderful. It really is. It's just amazing. So, without further
thank
ado,
you. Yeah, thank you so much. So I think all good storytelling has to be true, and not literally true, but has to be both emotionally true, true to human nature, true in the way that the universe works. I think that's just the way that things are set up. And one of the core things about people is they are this strange mixture of good and bad.
yeah,
And so that's kind of core to all storytelling. That's just core to the way the world is, and it can't be any other way. And then the setup, and for any kind of storytelling, and you need some kind of setup, right, where you've got opposing forces. Otherwise, you can't have any conflict.
sure.
And so initially, when we were thinking about this, we were like, well, we've got Jazz Cow. Um, and what's jazz symbolically represent? It symbolically represents freedom. It represents creativity. It represents improvisation. It represents a level of intelligence. It's to be able to improvise uses like all sorts of parts of the brain, and
Absolutely.
it's got all these things going on at the same time. And then on the so you go, what's the opposite of that? The opposite of that is very algorithmic kind of thinking. It's the top down. It's the lack of freedom. It's the following the system. So that was initially the kind of setup of the two worlds. And from when we first came up with the idea, though that's become more extreme. I think the technology as technology's grown, it's enabled people to have more power, and it's enabled people to um, grasp more in a way.
Yeah.
There's a brilliant book by C.S. Lewis called The Abolition of Man, and he talks
Mm.
about how you, the more you grasp, it's like you get more and more power to grasp, but then you I guess you keep subduing everything in the world, but you can't actually control yourself. And yeah, it's brilliant book. But you've got all these kind of layers of things, and it's actually a very very simple setup.
Hmm.
But on top of that, those themes, you you can build so much. And I think as we look at our society, we do have technology is never the actual problem. People are the problem,
Truth.
and the problem is we are naturally addicted to the wrong things. And
Mm.
there's a jazz critic who guy called Ted Joyer, and he did recently did a post that kind of sums it up really well. How entertainment we used to worry about entertainment eating art, but now distraction is eating entertainment,
Wow.
and that's all created through um, that's all basically based upon addiction. So you've got because it's all about the clicks, it's all about the dopamine rush.
Yes.
And he talks about how you go from sport, which is very people are running, they're playing football, they're very engaged, to then people watching sport, which is the first removal, and then the third removal is where people are betting on sport,
Yeah.
and and the gambling becomes the thing. And
Hmm.
so this happens with everything in society. And these tech guys, they're very, very good at working out what hooks people, what works really. So
Sure.
yeah, we've observed these things. It's not
Yes.
unique to observe these things, but I guess it's how all these things come together, become something original.
Well, you were talking about the dopamine rushes that we seem to crave. Do you think that that's a factor? I'm asking you from a neurological point of view, but do you think that that's a factor with respect to the attention deficit that most people seem to suffer through now, where everything has to happen like that, or it no longer holds our attention?
I'm no neurologist, but I
I
think
know.
yes. I see it myself, and once I turned off alerts on my phone, so I
Mm-hmm.
didn't, so the red dot is no longer on my phone, and
Exactly.
once I was so much more productive. I could focus much more on the
That's right.
work I was doing, and so I've observed this in myself. I tell everyone just turn off alerts.
That's correct. That's correct. No, I agree with you. And full transparency, I've never had alerts from any app engaged on my phone because I just want to be where I am in that moment. And I think that if it's important enough, if it's not my wife or my daughters, I don't need to turn from it and I'll get to it when I do. And so that's kind
Yeah,
of helped keep me on focus with some of the progress that we've been blessed to make. But I hear attention deficit all the time with respect to even how movies are made. Of course, with the songs, which, as a jazz guy, 7 minutes, 11 minutes for a tune is like, yo, we're just getting started. We're just warming up to what needs to happen. But, when you look at the streaming platforms and whatnot, oh, the song has got to be, 2 minutes and 30 seconds, or we're going to start with the hook and grab you with a verse or two, but there's no bridge, there's no journey, there's no exploration. And,
yeah.
how do you
Well, the
find that?
problem is the labels have gone in with TikTok. So
Yes,
and TikTok videos, they say you have to be less than 10 seconds to be successful or something.
it's
So
amazing,
how
right?
can
It's amazing.
you think of all the great pieces of music across
Right.
any genre? Doesn't really matter.
That's correct.
You can't you can't do a great piece in less than 10 seconds.
Yes.
It's and often in the days of buying albums, you'd buy an album where you're buying it for two or three tracks, but actually
Mm.
it's not the two or three tracks that you keep listening to the album for. It's the other ones, and
Yes.
it's you lose all of that.
Sure. Sure. I mean, we could, that would take us an hour and 15 minutes to dive into because, being a long time listener as you have been, I mean, I think I bought my first album at 11 years old or so, but that whole experience, like you said, of the tactile, feeling it, putting it on the record player, putting the needle on it, reading through the liner notes, getting another
Mm,
album and finding out, oh, well, he wrote that song exactly as you described earlier, and just the experience. It wasn't for us, at least in my circle that I grew up in formatively, listening to music, it wasn't necessarily the hit. It was the whole thing. It was, did you hear that album? And in those days, it was like maybe 38 minutes, a little less than 40 because it was
mm,
vinyl. And then, of course, when the CD came out and you had 80 minutes, it's like, oh, this is an even greater experience. And the quote unquote hit single might have been the drawing card to bring you to that artist's attention, or, bring them to you. And wow, I'm discovering someone. But like you said, it wasn't that 3 minutes and 33 seconds that they played on the radio. It was what
mm.
happened after or before that really snagged you. Now, so I'm asking this question or stating this to set up with how much that aligns with Dr. Popp. Is he the TikTok? Is he the Spotify? Is he the person that's just the cookie cutter, here you go, this is the formula. And if you stray from this formula, we may not even play you
Yeah,
because you
he
don't
is
matter
that.
to us, you know?
Yeah, he's all of those tech platforms. He's the record company owner. He's the Hollywood guy. But yeah, he's TikTok. But he's also the guy that sells junk food. It's because it's all of the same thing. It's all
Yeah.
about. It's the opposite of slow. It's
Mm.
the instant gratification that leaves you empty. That's what he sells, and it's the constant instant gratification. So he's all of those things, really.
Wow. That's that's really, as I said before, you have a lot of layers kind of tucked away in this. Now, I guess the next question I would like to ask is why a cartoon as far as the presentation, as opposed to a sitcom, which you said the one writer he writes for a lot of different sitcoms in the UK. There, uh,
Mm.
why that platform of presenting Jazz Cow as a cow, as a cartoon character?
So that's where I'm from. So I'm an animator, and
Oh, gotcha.
the guys that I was working with, all animators, and it's the way I think, and
Mm.
so that was why. And I mean, you can't really do a live action cow anyway.
Well, that's true.
Um,
And
so,
much less playing the
although I have
saxophone.
made a big cow head that um, I'm gonna go out in the real world and do some stuff with. So, yeah, that's fun.
Excellent. Well, we need to talk about that a little bit because being an animator, share with us, your experiences, other projects that you have worked on that we may know of. What got you into animation? What type of, I'm giving you a lot, I know. What type of technology, are you currently using to help you, better tell your story?
Mm. So, um, my I'm just trying to rewind the question in my head.
Sorry, let's
Um,
start with your experiences and what other projects you may have worked
mm.
on that we may know about.
So my day job, if you like, is
Okay.
that I make animation for films, for I make animation for charities and businesses and local government and these types of things like informational stuff,
Hmm.
and then developing my own more entertainment based stuff on the side. And I run a film and animation company with my brother, so um, that's if you like that's my bread and butter.
Gotcha.
And um, yeah, trying to, and we're always looking for work to do the stuff that pays the bills.
Right.
Um, and um, I've forgotten what my brain is like not working for some
That's
reason.
quite all right. So the second thing would be, what type of technology are you
Mm.
utilizing to help you tell your story?
Yeah, so when when we started, we literally were using pen, paper, and a
Mm.
little plastic bar to make sure the paper didn't move around.
Wow.
And no one's going to pay for that today because it's too time consuming. And
Yeah.
so I have a thing that I draw straight into the computer,
Yeah.
and I use a I use a piece of software called Toon Boom Harmony. I also use some software called After Effects, but
Hmm.
I think there's so much emphasis on software these days, and actually quite a lot of competing software now do similar things. I like a lot of the things that it does.
Hmm.
They're not necessarily going to be the tools that we end up using on the project because we're working with and I didn't mention this with team, but a brilliant guys in Argentina that run a animation um, studio. So I'll be
Hmm.
working with these guys, and they'll have their own sets of tools. Um, but yeah, things have got a lot easier since we could now draw straight into the computer and manipulate things in the computer. Um,
Wow.
yeah.
That's very interesting. And I was going to say, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that, for me, I'm not necessarily a quote unquote cartoon watcher. When I was a kid, loved cartoons. Underdog was my guy. I guess maybe that's why Jazz Cow appeals to me so much. But with respect to being an adult, and I know that there are shows like South Park or The Simpsons, which I don't watch. I would, however, say, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, that because of the multi layered themes you have concerning culture, society, man, good and evil, etc., uh, the animation would probably be a much better platform to be able to tell these type of stories uh, in a way that doesn't sound too preachy or condemning, but brings the critical thinker into Jazz Cow's world to kind of analyze their own. Am I?
Yeah, I think you can get away with a lot more in animation.
Mm,
I was listening to something the other day that the South Park guys have never managed to get cancelled, and yet and probably part of the reason why is because they use animation. um, but
yeah.
I I look up to the Simpsons a lot because it's seemingly quite simple. It's a show about a family,
Mm-hmm.
and there's it's a relatively simple setup, but actually some of its social critique and satire is incredibly smart.
Yeah.
And I think, and I don't think it could have been done in any other medium. I think it would have dated, and I think that you can go back and watch the first couple of seasons, which are the best, or the
Mm-hmm.
first few, and the jokes are still relevant today. And it's even though the whole world has moved on, we've got different issues, different politicians, everything's
Right.
different, but it's more universal and eternal. I think partly because they're not specifically going for any of the, they're not, yeah, they're not aiming at anyone who's a, I don't know, famous politician or something.
Sure.
That's not what's in their sights. It's more the broader cultural stuff,
Right.
which is more interesting anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But yeah, I just thought about that because again, as I said, when I was reading the newsletter this morning, even we had already talked. I knew what this conversation would primarily be about, but you interjected some of the things that I thought, man, this is brilliant. And I might be Jazz Cow. I mean, I might be that guy, that I'm looking at things and going, yeah, well, this is quite not correct. I mean, I guess it's someone else's interpretation as to whether they would deem it right or wrong, but I see myself as an outsider of looking at those analogies and going, from a musician standpoint, I don't know. And then from a spiritual standpoint, it's really interesting how you were able to draw all of those themes together. Now, let's talk about the Casablanca connection because both on
Mm.
your website as well as in your newsletter, you used Rick as, a very strong analogy to pull from. Why don't you give us the reason why?
I think the thing with Rick is, well, the context of Casablanca is you've got, they're in Vichy, France. It's in Casablanca in North Africa. It's under Nazi occupation, but the Nazis aren't properly they're not being hardline and Nazi particularly. They're a bit more, there's more corruption and letting people do their thing and turning a blind eye to stuff. And so that world of betrayal and intrigue is an interesting setting.
Yeah,
And people who are living in those environments have to be smart, and they have to, and it's quite hard to be good
yeah,
when you're in that environment. So what does it mean to be good? And I think, and I mentioned this in the article, but I struggled when we when we were talking about the character of Jazz Cow, because you need a character that's very gets on and does things, and they need to be clear motivation. And you can't have a passive hero. And
Right.
so, how does that work when? And it was watching Casablanca, I realized Rick is not passive. He
Mm-hmm.
just pretends to be passive.
Mm-hmm.
He's not cynical. He just pretends to be cynical. And I think so much of what we see on TV is full of cynicism
Yeah.
from the writers. And I think we've reached the end of that.
Mm-hmm.
And but there is this cynical exterior that at heart does the right thing. And I think that's an interesting setup. It can lead to lots of complexity, um, lots of hypocrisy, which is always fun for humor. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah,
Yeah.
and it fits within that kind of noir feel because uh, yeah, jazz was used for noir soundtracks from very very early on. So many great jazz musicians did the soundtracks to it, and I think
Yeah.
it was. I don't think it's a false connection that people made with jazz, but it's now become part of the aesthetic that jazz was connected with the underworld and all of these things. And I think,
Sure.
from my reading, I think that's been exaggerated by a few jazz musicians who
Sure.
wanted to have a kind of a bad image. But that's
Right.
a Jelly Roll Morton, I think, is mainly to blame. Most of
Certainly.
them were a lot more. They weren't as seedy as the image.
Absolutely. Well, let me ask then, what is the next step for Jazz Cow as far as your team, your company, as far as when the actual um, presentation will roll out? In what form can we find it in? Will it be available to us in the United States? Yeah, I just give you
Yeah,
10 questions to try to answer.
yeah. No, I like that because then I freeze and can't remember any. No, this is fine. Um, so so it's in autumn, or as you guys say, fall.
Yeah,
Um, we're we're going to put it on Kickstarter, so you can already sign up to
excellent.
like get notifications. Yeah, so we're going to launch on Kickstarter, and the aim is to raise the money to make the pilot. And then if
Excellent.
we raise enough money, we'll make the pilot, and and part of the rewards will be if someone wants to see it, they pay a certain amount of money, and they'll get a link to to it, and there'll be other rewards, and then um, and so that's global,
Mhm.
wherever there's internet and your government lets you watch stuff, then
Right.
you can get involved in that, and then our idea, hopefully off the back of that, is using that pilot to try and convince people to take the project on. So
Mhm.
streaming services or whoever. So that's
Sure.
that's the process.
Sure. Are you able to share just so that we have, so that we could encourage people to get involved with it, that there's a certain number that you're raising in order to, like, what's the victory number?
So we've got a few victory numbers, and I actually haven't spoken to the team about this properly, but we're going to do. I want to do a lower tier so we can just get over the line with an audio version with a short,
Okay.
um, as the first kind of tier, and then the main one we're aiming at will be 60,000 pounds, and that
Okay.
would be to do the full animated sitcom, and then
Hmm.
anything above that will make it easier because I'll be able to pay myself something as well, and
Absolutely.
we'll be able to do.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
that's kind of working. We I want to do a bit of work on the stages, but yeah, that's the kind of process that we're looking at.
So will it be
So it's
30
not
minute?
cheap.
No, it isn't. No, I can imagine. Not so anything that's worth doing is going to, cost you, financially and otherwise. But are these going to be 30-minute episodes, or 28 minutes and
So
30 seconds to fit?
22 minutes,
22
and
minutes.
about two of it will be credits. So 20
Okay.
minutes of proper, yeah, proper
Very,
action.
very cool. Man, that's very cool. Well, as I said before, I'm hoping to become your new best friend. You really put out something that is yeah, the word admirable is the first word that pops up in my mind, but I think it's deeper than that. I think that in our present society, you need that check of wait a minute, we're running down the hill at 100 miles an hour. Do we really see exactly what's happening? That you need to stop. And for me personally, in my own faith, as a Jesus follower and in my love for jazz music, there is room for pause to say, we need to stop and analyze what's happening and instead of just
Mm.
running, and running and not knowing where we're going. So I think you hit a
Yeah,
lot of
I
things
totally
on the
agree.
head. Yeah. So, John, I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy day, man. And please kiss all of your team members on the forehead for me. Tell them this is from a little bald brown guy that you don't know, but I just met. And he's in love with the concept. And I will do everything that I can from whatever quote unquote influences that I may have to talk about Jazz Cow and to send them to your website. Is there any direct way or another way you would want people to reach out to you once they know so that they can get on your newsletter or what have you?
So the best way is jazzcow.co.uk, and then you can sign up to the newsletter there. You can click the notify me when we launch. You
Okay.
click through to there, and from there you can find all the links to everything. So you can find us social media and all that kind of stuff through that. So
That's
yeah,
excellent.
and yeah, feel free to um, anyone can. I'm quite easy to find, so my name is Googleable. So
Say that three times
yeah, feel
fast.
free to reach out to me.
Googleable, Googleable, Googleable. Very cool, man. Well, thank you. I know this won't be our last time talking, but I appreciate you helping to set this out on the Entre Musician and made many people fall in love with the concept. And you rank among The Simpsons and South Park and others in due time. May it just
Thank you
happen
so
in a matter of
much.
time, my friend. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Well, blessings to you. And that's going to do it for this episode of The Entre Musician. I figured that you would really appreciate a conversation like that with such a gentleman who is very potent in the themes that he is looking to represent. And man, the presentation of doing it in animation and having this wonderful cow who plays saxophone really begin to place his principles and ideals against Dr. Popp. So it's going to be great. I love it. I love it already and can't wait to see the final product. My name is Jerry B. I am the Entre Musician. You make sure that you get out there and tell everybody you know that you get down with the Entre Musician. You know why? Because as I said, my name is Jerry B, but you are an Entre Musician as well. So let's get out there and kick it. Peace and blessings to you. I will see you next time. God bless.